Tea houses on the roadside, with scattered shadows coming from the street, 2 or 3 shouts, shake the fan in front of the person, stroke the ruler and pat the table. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen carefully and share your thoughts. There are many things in this world, the mountains and rivers of time, how much passion and melancholy there is in the storms of the martial arts world, that extraordinary dream of the king, a ridiculous scene. The difference between gods and ghosts is not a matter of superiority. Immortals, monsters, demons, and monsters. Time wasted brings retribution. We are not saints, both of us have confusion. Life is shorter than the passage of the sun and moon. A folding fan exhibition, blending the way and emotions. The mysterious changes of Tian Gang Di Sha with a stroke of a ruler. 1,000 layers of waves rise. Sentient beings are all rolling in the mortal world. P.S. The first few sentences of the introduction are the lyrics of the song, The Storyteller. Book enthusiasts can listen to this song and sing the entire introduction according to the melody, which is very meaningful. _. Keywords of the novel. Detailed description of the world without pop-ups. Detailed description of the world. Download the complete set of TXT, and detailed description of the latest chapters in the world for reading. Chapter 1. Sound into the Peach Blossom Land. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Sound into the Peach Blossom Land. On the blocked river in Zhoushan County, a small wooden boat is slowly moving along a narrow tributary of the river. The surrounding mountains and rivers are beautiful and the scenery is pleasant. In this scorching summer, the temperature is still comfortable at over 20 degrees. Standing at the bow of the boat, Shuyuan couldn't help but sigh in his heart. No wonder, Peach Blossom Spring records that he found a paradise from here. Many people think that Changde is equivalent to ancient Wuling, but in fact, during the Jin and Yuan dynasties, the only place on the Chinese map called Wuling was now Zhoushan County, which was called Wuling County at that time and belonged to Shanyong County. The blocked river under the small boat was the Wuling River at that time, which was also the place that Yi Shuyuan had always wanted to come to. Between these mountains and rivers, Yi Shuyuan's sense of immersion sparked a book addiction. Imagining a certain scene in his heart, his throat breathing changed, and he spoke with emotions in his mind. In the middle of Jin and Taiyuan, the people of Wuling engaged in fishing as a profession. They traveled by the stream, forgetting the distance of the road. Suddenly, they met the peach blossom forest, with hundreds of steps between the banks, and there were no miscellaneous trees in the middle. The fragrant grass was delicious, and the fallen petals were colorful. Yi Shuyuan seemed to be immersed in the artistic conception of the Peach Blossom Spring, with a clear and powerful voice. In Yi Shuyuan's mind, it seemed to depict the scene of a fisherman sailing leisurely on the water during the Jin Taiyuan period. With a level of Mandarin proficiency and his own emotional and imaginative imagery, his fingers slowly pointed towards the shore, as if peach trees had transformed there. The old man rowing at the stern of the boat was quite engrossed, and even instinctively looked in the direction of Yi Shuyuan's fingers, but of course, he didn't see any peach trees. Yi Shuyuan was brewing his emotions at the moment, and the boatman thought he had finished reading, so he couldn't help but speak up. "Young man, are you quite solid? Your voice sounds strange and pleasant. What kind of job do you do?" Yi Shuyuan helplessly turned his head to look back and pointed to the motion camera he was carrying on his finger. "Grandpa, I'm just a foodie online. You can treat me like a storyteller." The old man rowing suddenly realized. Oh. Are you that kind of internet celebrity?" Upon hearing these words, Yi Shuyuan chuckled self-deprecatingly. The combination of storytelling and oral skills allows one person to perform all kinds of wonderful works in the book. Since ancient times, a few storytelling artists have had extraordinary achievements in this field, but to this day, it cannot be completely cut off, but it is also difficult to find a trace. And that's where Yi Shuyuan's ambition lies. He once believed that he had exceptional talent and could achieve something. After working for a few years, he resolutely resigned and devoted himself to the new media industry based on his dream. But hard work does not necessarily lead to success, and the emergence of various AI voices has also shattered Yi Shuyuan's confidence. Now that he has traveled all over the country here, it is almost time to move from his dreams to real life. Grandpa, I just play around and don't get along with internet celebrities. If you think it sounds good to me, then I'll keep talking. There's more to come. Ironically speaking, Yi Shuyuan felt that his most famous time was actually in college. However, it was not a good reputation, but was criticized by the whole school. That time, Yi Shuyuan's dormitory was drunk, and he pulled him outside the white wall of the school library to write a prominent slang. From then on, Yi Shuyuan's nickname, Immortal, Divine Stick, spread throughout the school, and even the counselor followed suit. Wow, yes. The sound of the boating master interrupted Yi Shuyuan's brief memories. The latter cleared his mind and took a deep breath, brewing his emotions again. He turned around and looked ahead, imagining the magic in his heart. The fisherman was very different. He walked forward again, wanting to deplete his forest. When the forest ran out of water, he found a mountain with a small mouth, as if there were light. Yi Shuyuan's voice slowed down, and he slightly widened his eyes. His pupils involuntarily dilated, and in a daze, he seemed to have a real illusion and saw a hazy light ahead. Bang! The small boat suddenly collided with something, and Yi Shuyuan was caught off guard and didn't even react. With an "ah" sound, he fell into the river amidst the exclamation of the master at the stern of the boat. Pu Tong! At the moment of falling into the river, Yi Shuyuan seemed to have seen something crash into the boat, which seemed to be a large piece of ice. In the next moment, Yi Shuyuan was engulfed by countless flowing water. He struggled to float while paddling, and even sank faster as he paddled, as if bound with lead blocks, falling into a terrifying deep darkness, like a huge mouth about to devour him. Wuwuwupu puru 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 puru. The panic and fear brought about by the current situation made it even harder for Yi Shuyuan to hold his breath, and countless bubbles overflowed from his mouth. The speed of his body sinking was getting faster and faster. Yi Shuyuan didn't know how much water he had poured into his mouth, and his consciousness became no longer clear. Apart from the suffocation on his body, the surrounding water seemed to be getting colder and colder, and his struggle also weakened. It's so uncomfortable, so cold. Am I going to die? In the darkness, there seemed to be hazy streams of light flashing in front of Yi Shuyuan's dim gaze, and his mind was filled with scenes of memories like a lantern, even producing some illusions. There were figures, writings, sounds, and various familiar or unfamiliar versions of himself, such as long clothes and armor, and all of this seemed both in my mind and in front of me, as if I was about to leave Yi Shuyuan like my own life, and turn into a beam of light flying away from my body. At this moment, Yi Shuyuan instinctively wanted to reach out and grab at all of this, as if the stirring stream of light had been caught at his fingertips. Long the flowing light swayed, and his fingertips trembled incessantly. Yi Shuyuan's heart seemed to shake dramatically, giving him a sense of fear that he would be torn apart. At the moment when my mind was shaken, countless light spots exploded in an instant, and the flowing light flew away like a thread. Rumble! The impact caused the water flow to continuously roll and disperse, with countless stars shooting and dissipating. The remaining flowing light on Yi Shuyuan's fingertips flickered away, and he flipped his entire body in the water, making the scene increasingly blurred. Dong! Yi Shuyuan hit something on his head, and suddenly he woke up from his drowsiness. In his panic, he paddled wildly and was pleasantly surprised to find that the constant entanglement was gone. There was no need to worry about anything else. Yi Shuyuan only dared to take a glance at the dark water and then vigorously rowed up, the intense pain of suffocation driving his form crazy. Bang! Yi Shuyuan's head hit something, and in a burst of clattering sound, his body crawled out of the water through a split crack. Hee hee, cough, help, Yi Shuyuan shouted and groped around, only to realize in the chaos that there were patches of floating ice beside him, but it shook so hard that he couldn't even lie down. Ice. How could there be ice? But at this moment, Yi Shuyuan had no time to think much. He realized that the shore was not far away and swam over with all his might, kicking the water. However, he was now physically exhausted and his limbs were stiff, barely lying on the shore with no strength to come up. He could only use his cold and trembling mouth to constantly call for help. Hee, is there anyone there? Help. But what caught my eye was the forest mixed with snow, and the sunset shining on the valley, like a desolate mountain and old forest, making Yi Shuyuan's heart even colder than ice water. But there are actually people here. Behind a few big trees not far from the shore, there was a group of people hiding. One of them hesitated when he saw the scene in the river and was about to go out, but was pulled by people around him. Let him thump for a while longer, the stronger the thump, the better. That beast likes to live. So, a group of people waited quietly for a while longer, watching Yi Shuyuan struggle in despair over there. As he became quieter and quieter, the person who had just spoken couldn't hold their breath. Big brother, it seems that he won't come today. In the midst of his words, the man saw his elder brother nod and immediately rushed towards the riverbank. In just a few steps, he had already arrived at the shore. In the surprised look of Yi Shuyuan's eyes, he reached out and grabbed his arm. Walalala, just mentioning it, Yi Shuyuan, who was soaked in ice water, was carried out of the water by the newcomers. Thank you, thank you. Yi Shuyuan was so frozen that he could hardly speak, while the person who saved Yi Shuyuan grinned and turned to smile at the crowd coming behind him. Does he still have to thank us? Ha 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 ha. There was a burst of laughter coming from over there. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Evil People and Evil Things. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Evil People and Evil Things. In a dilapidated earthen house in the mountains, a bonfire rises on the inside of the house, with a pot hanging on a shelf. A group of people gathered around the campfire, while Yi Shuyuan, dressed in a tattered cotton jacket, curled up in the innermost corner, gradually calmed down as he baked the fire. However, at this moment, Yi Shuyuan's heart was very chaotic, extremely anxious, and he also forced himself to calm down. The joy of being rescued from the shore had long disappeared, because even if he couldn't figure out the situation, he understood that his situation was not good. To understand from some words heard by Yi Shuyuan, the earthen house where everyone is located is actually an abandoned post station. Previously, Yi Shuyuan was so frozen that he couldn't speak, but now he dare not speak casually. These people inside the house were not only dressed in strange clothes, but also holding either knives or long-pointed guns, as well as hooks and ropes, pushing and shoving Yi Shuyuan around as if he were a piece of goods. The fierce and evil aura between his eyebrows and eyes seemed to be visible to the naked eye, and he was not a kind person. Yi Shuyuan once thought it was an ancient drama shooting scene, but with some relevant work experience, he only needed to scan the surroundings and found that there were no equipment or staff to immediately reject this possibility. The so-called abandoned post station he was in also had no traces of modernization. Now in Yi Shuyuan's heart, apart from a hint of unrealistic luck, there is only an endless sense of absurdity and fear. However, Yi Shuyuan remained silent, while the others in the room were chatting happily. Big brother, should we move to a higher section of the river or a place closer to the shore tomorrow? The speaker was a person who was closer to Yi Shuyuan. He was wrapped in a fur coat similar to a vest, but inside he was wearing a wide cloth jacket. His hair was tied in a bun with a silk scarf, but some of it was scattered on the back of his head, indicating that his hair was not short. Yi Shuyuan clearly remembers that it was this person who lifted him out of the icy water with one hand, and then carried him with one hand from behind for a long way to get here. Although others dressed differently, they are basically similar. The so-called big brother didn't speak yet, and someone nearby complained about driving. It's been these days, there's no trace at all. Is there an error in the news? Yeah, I don't have enough dry food to carry. If we keep going like this, will we treat him as food? A person grabbed a branch and poked the fire pile, saying terrifying words before pointing the spark-burning branch towards Yi Shuyuan, causing him to briefly suffocate. Eating people. Eat me. Yi Shuyuan's already pale face was even bloodless. Alright, don't scare him anymore. You're not afraid to become stupid even if you eat a fool's meat. Ha ha ha, I'm already stupid enough, no matter how stupid I am. What are you saying? Did I say it wrong? You. The indoor atmosphere suddenly became tense, and their temperaments were obviously not ordinary, even holding down their weapons. At this moment, a short-bearded man who had been silent finally spoke up. Alright, stop making trouble. That animal has boundless power, but it's timid and cunning, which is really difficult to deal with. Tomorrow we need to think of other ways, but we must not give up easily. The snow python is a rare beast in the world. If we can obtain the snow python's gallbladder, it will be better than countless gold and silver treasures. That's right, I heard that even if taken directly, it can greatly improve our ability to dispel all kinds of illnesses. Of course it's for sale, so we can be prosperous for the rest of our lives. If it were offered to that emperor, wouldn't it be possible to become an official? I'm afraid it would have to be given to a high-ranking official. Money can't be reduced either. You're right. Ha ha ha. Amidst everyone's laughter and longing, the short-bearded leader turned to Yi Shuyuan, who was pondering the word emperor. When he saw someone looking over, he instinctively shrank into a corner. Well, go, give him some hot soup and something to eat. That's just one bait, and killing him would be really troublesome. Got it. Yi Shuyuan's gaze quickly turned to the answerer, who was a man who looked noticeably thinner even though he wasn't wearing thin clothes. Among this group of people, he was quiet and had been in charge of the pot before. The conversation direction of others began to shift toward some vulgar jokes, such as girls from certain cities and buildings, and pretty widows from certain places. Although Yi Shuyuan's eyes have been watching the dog, watching him fill the soup with bamboo cans, watching him take out mantu from the cloth bag, and even Yi Shuyuan can't help licking his tongue and swallowing saliva, his eyes and ears have been watching what other people are talking about. Once again, it was confirmed that there were no traces of scenery or equipment, and the fierce aura that suppressed Yi Shuyuan's emotions, as well as his near-death experience in the ice, made him realize that he was really not acting. Here, the soup is still a bit hot, please be careful. Yi Shuyuan carefully reached out and held the bamboo pot and mantu. His hunger and desire could not be suppressed anymore. He carefully raised the bamboo tube, took a sip to test the temperature, and then took a few big sips of golu golu. The soup was delicious and warm, with a warm and intense heat flowing through his mouth into Yi Shuyuan's stomach, quickly warming his body and even his mind, giving him a feeling of being still alive. Later, Yi Shuyuan began to chew mantu with his mouth full, and then swallowed the soup. His body's desire and environment made him forget his gentleness. Seeing that Yi Shuyuan could eat and drink, Go just left and returned to the position where he had just squatted. The conversation over there seemed to have come to an end, and someone turned their head to look at Yi Shuyuan, who was wolfing it down, and asked with a clear smile. Hey, that fool, where is your home? Hearing this, Yi Shuyuan, who had just swallowed the last mantu, was stunned, but his body was a step faster than his mind, and almost instinctively spoke out. My home is in Shiha village, Yuanjiang County. My mother is waiting for me to come back. Speaking of which, Yi Shuyuan suddenly closed his mouth. What's going on? Where is that? As his thoughts moved, a vague but bright memory also emerged in Yi Shuyuan's mind. It was a peaceful village, with cats, dogs, chickens, and ducks. Ha ha ha, he knows this complete sentence and answers every time he asks. Ah ha ha ha. By the campfire, there was another burst of laughter, while Yi Shuyuan himself felt even more uneasy while also having some imaginative thoughts. It was the Go who came over to take away Yi Shuyuan's bamboo tube after seeing that he had eaten it all. However, Yi Shuyuan tightly gripped it and looked up at the Go. This was Yi Shuyuan's subconscious behavior, but the next moment he realized this was irrational, so he quickly let go of his hand. Ah Go pulled back the bamboo tube and looked at the disheveled man with a frightened and uneasy expression, sighing. I'll serve you a little more. Someone on the side looked sideways at Ah Go and joked. Ah Go, we must take good care of our fools, otherwise we won't be able to top up with you if we run out of bait. Upon hearing this, Ah Go's body shrank slightly. Yi Shuyuan, who had been paying attention here, could feel that he also showed obvious fear, but the so-called big brother immediately spoke. Ah Go, don't listen to him talk nonsense, just do your job well. After speaking, the big brother glared fiercely at the person who had just been joking, who waved his hand repeatedly, but his playful smile did not diminish. Yi Shuyuan in the corner kept taking deep breaths to ease his overly excited heart due to fear. His gaze was as low-key as possible, observing everything inside the room. He saw dark spots resembling blood stains on the corners of some people's clothes, some notches on the blade when wiping weapons, and also saw dark objects reflecting cold light. Yi Shuyuan suppressed the remaining luck in his heart. These people are truly ruthless killers. The light of the campfire flickered slightly, and in Yi Shuyuan's eyes, the shadows behind the group of people twisted constantly, appearing like various bare-headed monsters in a daze. The soup-filled Ah Go came over again, but Yi Shuyuan, who had been waiting for hot soup, couldn't help but feel a greater unease, a unease that vaguely surpassed the group of villains in front of him. Unconsciously, Yi Shuyuan had already gently covered his nose, and a strange and putrid odor appeared, from non-existent to increasingly clear. Yi Shuyuan looked around, and the villains by the campfire were chatting and laughing unconsciously. Even Ah Go, who was carrying a bamboo tube, had no other reaction. No. Yi Shuyuan only felt a tingling scalp and a growing sense of unease in his heart. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Who is the other party? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Who is the other party? In the mountain forest outside the abandoned post station, a large snake with a barrel size is slowly crawling, but its slow speed is only an illusion caused by the interweaving of volume and body shape with the environment, but in reality, its speed is astonishing. The scales of a large snake are as silent as snow, and if it weren't for the bending of branches and leaves and the sinking of some snow from withered grass where it crawled, it could almost merge with the surrounding environment. Snakes are hibernating animals and dislike cold environments, but this one is clearly an exception. Hiss, the big snake, amidst its hissing, lifted its head and looked at the flickering room not far away. It also faintly heard the conversation and laughter inside, and could smell the various smells inside more clearly. These people, who are different from the animals in the mountains, have been advancing to this mountainous area for about half a month. Due to their obvious strange behavior, the big snake has not hunted or done anything else during this period, but has been observing this group of people. Hiss, the aroma of meat came from the flickering flames, and the big snake climbed up the rock path from the snow, then coiled the rock and hung it on a tree that had been picked out of the mountain wall. Most of its body was suspended in the upper right corner of the abandoned post station. Tonight, the dark clouds cover the sky, and other parts of the mountains and forests are relatively dim. The faint glow of the abandoned post station also becomes apparent at this moment. After enduring it for so long, the big snake is hungry today. Inside the abandoned post station, Yi Shuyuan looked around with some suspicion, but even if others noticed his movements, they didn't take it seriously. After all, this fool has always been like this. Here, drink it. Ah Go numbly handed the bamboo tube to Yi Shuyuan, but as he took it, he also grabbed his arm. Ah Go looked at the fool in front of him in surprise, only to see his pale face, frowned and straight eyes staring at him. In Yi Shuyuan's eyes, there was clearly a hint of immaturity on the face of this Ah Go. When Ah Go's body blocked in front of Yi Shuyuan, he finally had a different expression from a fool for the first time. This is not the kind of look that a fool should have. At the moment when Ah Go looked at each other, a thought suddenly flashed through his heart. Yi Shuyuan, who was staring at him, slowly looked up. Ah Go instinctively followed Yi Shuyuan's gaze and looked up together. Then, he widened his eyes and his pupils were also expanding at the same time. Silently, a large white snake head has penetrated the breach at the east corner of the post station. Subsequently, as Ah Go's pupils contracted violently, the snake head shot out like lightning, making him stiff like falling into an ice cellar. At this moment, Ah Go felt a strong force coming from his right hand, pulling his body forward and tilting it forward. It was Yi Shuyuan who forcefully tugged at Ah Go's hand. In the next moment, the man who was originally behind Ah Go was shrouded in the snake's mouth, unable to even shout, and was immediately lifted up by the giant snake, dragging only a whimper sound away. At the moment when the people around looked up in shock, they only saw a pair of legs that kept kicking and kicking disappear at the corner breach of the post station. Not good, it's a snow python. That beast would have left the icy waters. Everyone get up and copy this guy. Be careful, it's right outside. What should I do? It's so big. Quiet. The short bearded man led by him roared and stood up with a knife, while the others quickly grabbed their weapons one by one, looking anxiously at the surrounding roofs and walls. Cold sweat seeped out and slowly flowed down from the foreheads and cheeks of these people at this moment. The hunter and prey situation reversed. As for the person who was just carried away by the snake, is it dead or alive? No one mentioned the group of people who used to call themselves brothers and sisters. Yi Shuyuan was panting slightly, his heart beating incredibly fast. In fact, he could have followed the uneasy reminder, but his heart was full of contradictions. After hesitating for a while, the unease turned into reality. How could there be such a big snake in the world? White. And at this moment, Ah Go, who could barely escape the disaster, felt his heart pounding. He lay on the wall beside Yi Shuyuan, looking up with lingering fear, and then at the fool beside him who didn't even know his name. If it weren't for this person pulling me, would it be me who just died? Ah Go thought to himself and had already sentenced the person who was taken away to death. Hoo. After a moment of silence, eerie cold wind invaded the house from various corners such as the roof, eaves, and door crevices of the post station. The bonfire over there also kept swaying in the cold wind, and it seemed that it was becoming increasingly dangerous to extinguish. Not good, protect the campfire. The leader's voice couldn't help but tremble at this moment, as a group of people quickly blocked the cold wind with their bodies, and some panicked and added firewood. Don't add firewood, don't add it. Don't everyone manage the fire, pay attention to the surroundings. In a hurry and with the invasion of cold air, the campfire almost went out. It was difficult to hold on to the flames with half of the people guarding the fire and the other half paying attention to the outside. Big brother, is that still an ordinary snow python? Someone trembled and asked, although it was a fleeting glance, the size of the snow python was not normal. The leader tightly grasped the handle of the knife, his palm rubbing against it with a delicate sound, while also trying to adjust his breath. The previous plan was to lure the snow python into swallowing people during its activity period. If the snake swallowed people, it wouldn't run fast or be fierce. As long as it started quickly, it could easily control the snow python. However, no one expected this snake to be so big and its speed would be even more astonishing. That beast is probably going to become sperm. At this moment, fear constantly grows and amplifies in everyone's heart. No matter how powerful the snow python is, it is just a strange snake, a beast. But if it really becomes a spirit, it is the legendary monster, which makes people feel scared from the bottom of their hearts. Yi Shuyuan also clenched his fists tightly. Becoming refined. Monsters. Yi Shuyuan's heart was filled with fear and eagerness, he didn't want to die. Evil people will eventually kill him, and the monster outside will definitely not let him go alone. What should I do? At this moment, Yi Shuyuan almost instinctively looked at Ah Go, who was also in a state of shock. If there really was anyone in this group who could rely on and be worth saving, it must be this person. At this moment, under the threat of life and death, Yi Shuyuan forced himself to calm down, and his brain was running rapidly. La 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 la. La 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 la. The heavy groans of wood came from the roof, and everyone inside held their breath and focused. Yi Shuyuan looked up briefly, then frowned and looked around, paying more attention to the bonfire that kept dancing in the cold current due to lack of care. At this moment, someone lowered their voice and said, "On the roof." The leader looked left and right and whispered, "If it has already become sperm, going on like this is not a solution, it must be." As the person spoke, Yi Shuyuan's muscles were already tense. Before the big brother could finish speaking, the already shaky campfire suddenly went out at this moment, and in an instant, the room fell into darkness. "Break up and escape, you can live out of the mountain." The leader shouted, and a group of people scattered in multiple directions in an instant. Their body movements carried a strong wind and swept up ashes and sparks, with a speed faster than Yi Shuyuan could imagine. Bang, bang, bang! Someone ran away by smashing the door panel, someone smashed the wooden window and shot it flying. At this moment, Ah Go also had movements. He hesitated for a moment in his heart, and his body reacted faster than his mind. He grabbed Yi Shuyuan's collar with both hands and was about to throw him on his back. However, the strength of this foolish person from the past was astonishing at this moment. Before Ah Go could catch someone and lift them up, he was suddenly pulled and pressed by the person in front of him, causing him to lie on the ground. At the same time, a dirty hand was already covering his mouth and nose. At this moment, Yi Shuyuan's clear and steady murmur came to his ears. "Shoo, don't move, it's chasing after me." Ah Go was startled in his heart and extinguished his rebellious thoughts. He stared blankly in the direction of the fool, unable to see clearly in the darkness, but could feel the calm breathing of the other person. This person is not stupid at all. There were sounds coming from afar, as well as the sound of trees collapsing and rocks collapsing, and then the sound grew further and further away. Yi Shuyuan's heartbeat was very fast, and there was only one chance. The counterintuitive action taken at this time was gambled right. But while Yi Shuyuan was secretly enjoying himself, he suddenly looked at a place where there was a person lying beside the extinguished campfire. The other person clearly noticed Yi Shuyuan and Ah Go in the corner, and under the remaining sparks, their faces were turning towards this place. After waiting for about a few breaths, the person by the campfire seemed to want to jump up and escape, but when he saw the two people in the dim corner motionless, he slowly put down his hand. At this moment, the eyes of several people gradually adapted to the darkness, and with the help of the remaining sparks from the campfire, they were able to barely see things, and the faces of both sides also appeared before their eyes. That big brother. Yi Shuyuan was startled in his heart and immediately realized that he was such a cunning person. The person across from me is squinting his eyes at this moment. Ah Go and that fool, P.S. After brewing for a while, the new book of Xianxia has finally been released to everyone. The book has been signed and we hope that everyone can support it and let more people see it. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Two-phase doubts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Two-phase doubts. After waiting for about a dozen breaths, Yi Shuyuan's sense of smell told him that the opportunity was inevitable and he would not come again. He patted Ah Go, but felt his body stiffen. Yi Shuyuan couldn't fit any longer, and at such times he didn't care about anything else. He suddenly stood up, unsure of where his strength came from, and at the same time pulled Ah Go up from the ground. "Let's go. The smell of that strange snake has gone far away, it should be chasing someone else." Yi Shuyuan only had one thought in his heart, running in the opposite direction of that smell. There were still some scattered clothes inside the house, and Yi Shuyuan grabbed two of them casually. He grabbed the slightly stumbled dog and rushed out of the station through a broken small door. The leader almost stood up together, but he didn't react too aggressively or stop Yi Shuyuan's actions. Instead, he followed the two of them out of the station. As soon as he arrived outside, a more obvious cold suddenly hit. Yi Shuyuan didn't say anything, just ran in a direction he felt right, putting on clothes while running. However, after a while, his body was grabbed by someone and after a wave of shaking, he landed on Ah Go's back. Is this direction right? Hold on. In the next moment, Yi Shuyuan felt like he was soaring into the air. He instinctively grabbed Ah Go's neck and jumped a few meters high with Ah Go, flying forward for 10 meters before landing. Then, Go tiptoed a little and led Yi Shuyuan forward again. At this moment of fear and tension, the roller coaster-like feeling made Yi Shuyuan's heart beat faster, but upon realizing it, it also briefly made him lose focus. Is this lightness skill? But Yi Shuyuan quickly emerged from the shock of lightness skills, and some people were faster than them. The leader appeared like a ghost and arrived first. In just an instant, he had already surpassed the two of them, but he did not leave alone, but always lingered around Yi Shuyuan and Ah Go. Yi Shuyuan's eyelids twitched wildly, but the three of them had no conflict for the time being. They just kept moving forward together, and from time to time, some movements could be heard in the back, even shouting, cursing, and howling ah. A resounding scream echoed in the mountains, seemingly not far away. Ah Go, carrying Yi Shuyuan on his back, was noticeably flustered under his feet, his breathing became rapid, and his gait was somewhat incoherent. The black shadow beside him had already fled far away in an instant and quickly fled without a trace. Seeing that the dark shadow was gone, Yi Shuyuan immediately whispered to Ah Go. We're still far away, those people don't hesitate to die. Stay calm, adjust your breathing, and don't let your footsteps wander. Carrying a dog on his back would definitely run countless times faster than Yi Shuyuan himself. If Ah Go couldn't hold on, he wouldn't be optimistic either. I don't know if his words were effective, or maybe it was Ah Go's own survival desire. He quickly adjusted his breath and his steps became more orderly. If it were the leader carrying Yi Shuyuan, he would have to worry about whether the other party would directly throw him away, but Ah Go wouldn't. It's not because Ah Go believes that Ah Go is kind-hearted, but because Ah Go knows that he has survived through Yi Shuyuan's actions and instructions from just now on. To the left, try not to leave any marks. Forward deflection to the left, no, immediately to the right. Yi Shuyuan completely relies on his sense of smell to guide Ah Go away from the foul odor. When the odor cannot be smelled, it depends on his sensation. And here in Ah Go, although he is running for his life behind his back, there is a strange sense of security in his heart, and his emotions have gradually changed from panic to hope for survival. If we can live, we can live. Can live. Can survive. Yi Shuyuan also had the same idea in his heart. From lightness technique to running at lightning speed, gradually changing from sprinting to jogging, escaping from night to dawn all night long, Ah Go carried Yi Shuyuan on his back and ran for his life in the mountains, jumping until he was exhausted and escaping until dawn. Bathed in the eastern glow, Ah Go placed Yi Shuyuan under a nearby tree with melted snow, and then collapsed to the ground. Hee hee me, I don't have the strength anymore. Ah Go spread out his limbs and presented the character, big, lying on the ground panting heavily, unable to speak a complete sentence. Although his words were incomplete, Go was still looking at Yi Shuyuan, suspecting his identity and wondering why he could escape with him. Anyway, he could never be a fool. Yi Shuyuan was also tired. Although others were carrying him all night, still holding him almost exhausted his energy, just better than a Go. Don't worry, we should be safe now. Yi Shuyuan took a deep breath and slowly exhaled as he spoke. They had reached a mountain pass, and although it was still a mountain in the distance, it was obvious that the mountain was not as steep as in the back. He turned his head to look in the direction where the two had escaped, where the dawn light had not yet fully penetrated and was still dim and deep. At the same time, a feeling suddenly rose in Yi Shuyuan's heart that those people should not be able to come out. Poo, a mouthful of saliva mixed with some ashes, which had been held up all night, was spat out by Yi Shuyuan on the ground at his feet. This group of people who forced people to die was the best, bringing a sense of tranquility to the world. Except for one person. Just as he was thinking about it, Yi Shuyuan's body suddenly stiffened slightly. He turned his head to look in a direction, and almost at the same time, a voice came from a distance. I didn't expect that. I took a glance. A dog, who had just collapsed on the ground to rest, sat up and a figure walked out from behind a rock. Since it was discovered, he didn't hide anymore. Who else could there be if it weren't for that leader? Can't you really get rid of it? Yi Shuyuan took a deep breath. At this moment, he couldn't be an invisible person anymore. The leader just glanced at Ah Go, and his main attention fell on Yi Shuyuan. In that post station, I wondered, Ah Go, this kid can have such a city mansion. Who would have thought it was you? The leader grabbed the knife, and his voice gradually approached as he walked. Yi Shuyuan's hand, shrouded in his sleeve, tightly clenched his fist. The sunlight shone on his body, making him warm. However, his heart felt as if he had fallen into an icy lake, with only a trace of dignity remaining that prevented him from retreating. He sat there, dead, watching the leader approach. The person stopped about 3 feet away, clung the scabbard to the ground, and held the handle with his right hand, squinting his eyes as he looked up and down at Yi Shuyuan. The distance and movement made Yi Shuyuan frown, and then his heart twitched slightly. Yi Shuyuan had never studied martial arts or understood the martial arts of this world, but he had read a lot of messy knowledge in his daily life. Coupled with his personal intuition, he realized that the seemingly loose movements of the person in front of him were actually beneficial for both explosive and escape. This kind of heavy knife is obviously more suitable for chopping, and it should not be directly blocked in front of you if you are attacking. Under high pressure, many psychological activities only lasted for a short moment. Yi Shuyuan's eyes flickered slightly, which means he was on guard against me. That's right, thinking about it before, what's the reason for not being on guard last night? As expected by Yi Shuyuan, the leader also had multiple thoughts in his mind at this moment, carefully considering the previous events and last night's events. In addition, he realized that he had been discovered, and after weighing his options, he chose to appear. Your Excellency has such a strong listening ability, but it seems that your physical condition is not quite right. Psychological game, psychological game. Yi Shuyuan constantly hinted in his heart that his work and love, which had been accumulated over time under the talent bonus, had exploded into an advantage at this moment. He almost immediately entered the scene. This person is cunning, and vicious, so follow his way of thinking. If the situation is not right, it won't be difficult for you to end up losing. Yi Shuyuan instantly adjusted his voice line and opened his mouth, but it was a deep and cold tone, completely different from the previous stupid voice. The leader was taken aback, and Ah Go looked at Yi Shuyuan in astonishment. Perhaps due to the reaction brought about by the high pressure, Shuyuan found that his observation became extremely sensitive. He even noticed that the leader's right hand instinctively tightened the handle of the knife, making him nervous. But immediately, the leader's face showed a hint of smile again. Although his hand was still tightly gripping the handle of the knife, a relaxed expression appeared on his face, and he even twisted his muscles and bones in place, making a crackling sound. Why haven't you taken action yet? Yi Shuyuan's heart skipped a beat, but his face turned against intuition and his gaze froze. The leader felt a sense of crisis, frowned, and immediately spoke out. I guess you don't have much spare energy. If you take action, it will be harmful to others rather than self. Interest. At this point, the leader's heart suddenly moved and he blurted out a sentence. You're also here for the snow python's gallbladder. Your Excellency, how cunning. We thought we found a good bait, but unfortunately, we almost succeeded you. If you eat the snake's gallbladder, we might end up counting one by one and unable to escape. In an instant, everything had already been connected in the mind of the evil leader. This person was physically ill and had deceived us using methods such as turtle breathing. He pretended to be foolish and sneaked in, asking us to take him to search for the snow python, seize the snake gallbladder at the right time, and then recover. The others were left to be slaughtered by him. If it were me, I would do this. The leader felt a slight chill in his heart. P.S. Thank you to the book enthusiasts who have black eyes and King of Kings for giving rewards, as well as to other book enthusiasts who have given rewards and voted for support. I didn't expect anyone to give rewards to the alliance leader just after the book was opened. To be honest, it was quite touching. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Escape from Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Escape from Death. Thank you for your association. Yi Shuyuan breathed a slight sigh of relief. Since you are cunning and like association, let's make you think. His voice remains unchanged, with a sneer in his voice. Humph, I'm almost dead now. I used some tricks at the post station to lure the snow python in, and everything was accounted for. Speaking of this, Yi Shuyuan let out a slight sigh before continuing with some resentment and unwillingness. I didn't expect that the snow python had been refined into a monster. Even though I was arrogant, I dare not take action in such a situation. Upon hearing these, let alone the leader, the Go on one side took a deep breath. Surprisingly, the snow python was intentionally led to the post station by this person. It was originally catching someone as bait, but who would have thought that last night everyone was one person's bait? No wonder the snow python goes against its habits and leaves the glacier to an abandoned post station far from the river. Now it makes sense, not only because it may become sperm, but also because this is actually the person who used the means. The leader even instinctively took a half step back with his left foot, but his confidence did not completely dissipate. He tried to stabilize his breath and not show any fear. The person in front of him was too dangerous, and he had to find a way to escape. At most, you only have 1 or 2 strikes left, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't need Go to carry you on your back. Yi Shuyuan knew he couldn't push people to a dead end, and at the appropriate time, he had to give them a step down. Humph. After a cold snort, there was nothing else to say. This is the step given by Yi Shuyuan, which can be considered as agreeing to the other party's words. Just at this moment, Yi Shuyuan's body suddenly stiffened and his expression on the face became very ugly. That smell has reappeared and is getting closer. The leader breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the ugly expression on Yi Shuyuan's face. He guessed it right. The other party didn't want to fight, and he himself was like this. He grabbed the scabbard and took a slight step back. We haven't been able to obtain snake bile, so there's no irreconcilable conflict. I don't ask who you are, and you don't need to fight with me. How about we say goodbye? Yi Shuyuan squinted his eyes, suppressed the impulse in his heart, and forced himself to think for a moment before immediately saying, "Don't spread the news about the snow python." At this point, Yi Shuyuan's voice had slightly distorted. But the villain already had a preconceived impression in his heart, and even though he wanted to leave, he didn't notice it. Instead, he felt that this person even wanted to move monsters. Okay, it's a deal. Yi Shuyuan immediately said coldly. You go north and I go south. After 10 breaths, I will be free to do whatever I want. Let's say goodbye. The leader nodded and then clenched his fists. Seeing that the person was unresponsive, he took 2 more steps back and ran towards the distance. Yu Guang kept a close eye on Yi Shuyuan, watching him turn his head but not get up, and his movements became faster and faster. Don't leave me behind. Go usually thinks about how to get rid of that group of people the most, but at this moment, when he saw the leader running away alone, he panicked and shouted out. But even though the leader heard about it, how could he possibly take Go away? Not to mention that he doesn't care about Go's life or death, even if it has some effect, the person obviously has difficulty moving. If he takes Go away on his own without transportation tools, wouldn't it be forcing the family to take action? Yi Shuyuan did not allow Go to talk too much, but immediately spoke seriously. Carry me on your back, let's go. Go was afraid in his heart, but he didn't dare not disobey. He could only follow suit and carried Yi Shuyuan on his back, jumping south. The leader used his lightness skills and body techniques to the limit. When he borrowed strength from a tree at a mountain pass, the remaining light of his gaze seemed to have seen something. He turned his head in the air, and his pupils suddenly shrank after expanding. In an instant, he drew his sword and unsheathed it. Zheng, brushing and brushing, dang, 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 the dancing knife light hit the hard scales and emitted sparks, and a white figure quickly approached, which was the big snake. The leader leaped to the mountain wall with the help of the anti-seismic force, swiftly walking sideways, chopping and escaping. The stone wall in front of him collapsed, and his internal energy reached its limit, which was already unstable. He could only jump out in one fell swoop, but the snake head immediately chased and bit him. Drink. As he was about to be bitten, the leader, who had nowhere to rely in the air, threw away his scabbard and stomped on it. The scabbard plummeted rapidly, and his body also borrowed strength at a critical moment. He was able to pull himself up to avoid the snake's mouth, slapped the snake's head with a palm, and then thrust the tip of the knife from top to bottom on the top of the snake's head. When my arm is numb now, and the tip of the knife pricks a little blood on the top of the snake. Hiss, a white tail with a blurry silhouette swung towards him, and the leader was even hit with a horizontal sword in just time. Bang, a figure collided with the stone wall and slid down. The bent big knife fell beside him, and the giant snake had already pounced on it as it moved around. No. Ah! A mournful scream came from afar, and Yi Shuyuan trembled with fear. Ah Go's face turned pale, and his steps quickened a lot. It's here. Run. The smell was quickly becoming clearer, and Yi Shuyuan was so anxious that he shouted. Although Ah Go didn't feel any movement, goosebumps had already erupted all over his body, and he wished he had 2 more legs. But it's strange to say, I didn't go far at all. I just passed a mountain stream, from that steep mountain to the opposite mountain range. But in an instant, it gave Yi Shuyuan a sense of security, and the smell quickly faded with Ah Go's movement. Did it stop? Why didn't we pursue it? Yi Shuyuan turned his head to look at the mountains and forests where they were fleeing. Although he couldn't see where the big snake was, he knew it must be in some shadow in that direction. Yi Shuyuan's gaze fell and he looked at the mountain stream thoughtfully. Although it was not large, it divided the mountain range into 2 sides from afar. 12 or 15 minutes, half an hour time passed by minute by second, and the sun had risen high, bringing warmth to Yi Shuyuan at this moment. Ah Go was still running desperately, but the sense of crisis in Yi Shuyuan's heart had gradually dissipated. Is it finally safe? Yi Shuyuan breathed a deep sigh of relief. It seemed that the big snake was only guarding that part of the mountain. As for the evil leader, on the level of intuition and reasoning, Yi Shuyuan did not believe that the so-called leader could still survive. As soon as he relaxed, Yi Shuyuan couldn't help but chuckle a few times. Unexpectedly, this smile made the person carrying him tremble. Yi Shuyuan suddenly realized that Ah Go was still afraid of monsters, maybe even more so, so he quickly comforted him. Don't be afraid, Ah Go. That strange snake won't chase after you again, and I won't harm you either. But obviously, Ah Go didn't have much trust in this sentence, and his body was still tense. Yi Shuyuan frowned as he dared not immediately explain his recent behavior publicly. After all, a sense of defense is essential, and it is good to be respected. However, he also did not want the other party to constantly guard him. What if there was something wrong with him and he would give him a headache at night? After careful consideration, Yi Shuyuan could only speak with a smile. At this moment, his voice had returned to its original state and was much gentler. Ah Go, when the bonfire went out last night, you rushed over immediately. Are you trying to save me? Ah Go was afraid in his heart, but he hesitated and nodded, slowing down his pace. You also saved me before. Yi Shuyuan's smile remained unchanged. Do you know why I saved you? Ah Go was taken aback for a moment. Yes, he didn't need to save me at all. Anyway, everyone was his bait. Is it because I gave him food? Did he think he wanted to keep one? But why is it me, why? Yi Shuyuan also wanted the other party to think more and said half-truthfully. Although I have used some means, I am not as despicable as you think. Those people are all villains, willing to die at all, but you still have a way to be saved. As he spoke, Yi Shuyuan paused for a moment and said seriously. A person's conscience can sometimes save their own life, but without you, I wouldn't be able to survive either. You have a kind heart, and you have a life-saving grace for me. I can't harm you with both emotions and reason. I have already moved it with reason and understood it with emotion. I hope Ago can figure it out. Perhaps it was Yi Shuyuan's words that had an effect. Ago's face looked much better and his breathing gradually relaxed. Alright, let's take a break first. Ago was already quite tired, so he obediently put down Yi Shuyuan, but his expression showed a hint of caution, just not as timid as before. A little later, Ago pulled the cloth bag at his side, dug out a mantu and chewed it. Seeing Yi Shuyuan looking at him, his body was excited. He quickly took another one and handed it to him respectfully. Senior, let's have some food. Thank you. Yi Shuyuan reached out and took it, without thinking about whether it was poisoned or not. He ate it calmly. Halfway through the meal, he felt that the scattered hair was eyesore, so he grabbed a mantu, pulled a piece of rag from his body, and tied his hair back. Ago sat there eating while secretly observing Yi Shuyuan. This person's expression was calm and not harsh, especially after revealing his face. His facial features were straight and his eyebrows relaxed, his eyes were calm, and he even gave a feeling of a somewhat ethereal demeanor. If Yi Shuyuan knows what Ago thinks in his heart and understands that relying on his own face makes the other person more calm, he must roast that he always looks at his face. After a while, Go began to look in the direction of the past frequently, feeling a bit restless. Has he rested long enough? He still felt unsafe, afraid that the big snake would catch up, so he hesitated to speak. Senior, where are we going? Yi Shuyuan swallowed the mantu in his mouth, looked at the sunrise, which was not fierce at the moment but was already very warm, and said along with the feeling in his heart. First leave the mountain, then go to Yuanjiang County. No, senior. I'm afraid the big snake will catch up again. I ran away all night last night. Although Yi Shuyuan had a peculiar intuition that made him understand that the strange snake couldn't catch up this time, it was better not to take chances at this time. He didn't hesitate and stood up immediately. Listen to you. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Open your heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Open your heart. On the snowy mountain road, the two of them set off again, but of course, it was impossible to run recklessly like before. Firstly, it was not necessary for the time being, and secondly, Ago's legs were already weak today, so he needed to allocate his energy more reasonably during the journey. This time, I ran straight to the west of the sun, almost running in one direction for so long that even Ago didn't feel so nervous in his heart. Having relieved his worries about his life, Yi Shuyuan sat on Ago's back, but his heart gradually became somewhat confused. What place or world did he come to? It is obvious that he can no longer be in his original time and space. Feeling frustrated, Yi Shuyuan could only look for other things he was interested in to divert his attention, which was also convenient for understanding the current situation and enhancing communication with Ago. So he started chatting with him. Ago, are you good at lightness skills? Ago, who has been on the road, has actually been thinking about how to say something to his back, but he also feels that some of the topics he has in mind are not very suitable. At this moment, upon hearing Yi Shuyuan take the initiative to speak, Go immediately perked up his spirits. He was somewhat happy to hear such a senior praise him for his lightness skills and replied. Senior, I can handle just this light function. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have dared to think about saving others last night. Yi Shuyuan couldn't help but laugh, and Ah Go was nervous about saying the wrong thing. Little did he know that after experiencing the complex environment of the 21st century, Shuyuan felt that Ah Go's behavior was already very good. You can think of this and save me, already surpassing millions of people. Believe me, it's even more rare to still remember your original intention despite having fear in your heart. If it weren't for your own good heart, you wouldn't have walked out of this steep mountain. Ah Go didn't speak immediately. It was good to hear the praise, but he couldn't be happy. Yi Shuyuan was puzzled when he heard Ah Go whispering. I don't have any original intention. My dad is right, I'm just useless. Upon hearing this, Yi Shuyuan frowned and took the opportunity to explore whether Ah Go was trustworthy or not, so he asked again. Ah Go, why do you mix up with those people? Upon hearing this, Go's footsteps were rarely unstable. He was both afraid of Yi Shuyuan's misunderstanding and very uncomfortable. He instinctively wanted to explain that it would be dangerous for him to even forget to carry someone on his back. Senior, it's not as you think. Although I'm not a great person, I have fantasized about being chivalrous and righteous. As soon as Ah Go opened the box of words, he couldn't hold it back. Perhaps he had been holding it in his heart for a long time, or perhaps he had long wanted to find someone to confide in. No matter how afraid he was of Yi Shuyuan before, he would explain everything about himself and what happened afterwards to him in detail. The mountain road around him kept retreating, and Yi Shuyuan didn't mind Ah Go's slow pace. He silently listened on Ah Go's back, listening to the other person's emotional words, sometimes so excited that he could endure some crying. He knew that at such times, all he needed to do was listen. Still a child. Yi Shuyuan sighed in his heart. A person who originally longed for chivalry and righteousness, but ran away on his own due to escalating conflicts with his family. When he first arrived in the martial arts world, he went astray. Although he did not take the initiative to do evil, he repeatedly refused to save himself. In his heart, he regarded himself as an accomplice and couldn't get rid of that group of people. He felt both pain and resentment in his heart, and gradually became numb due to his cowardice and greed for survival. But at least my conscience is still alive. It was also from Ah Go's mouth that Yi Shuyuan became more aware of how fierce that group of people was, and couldn't help but feel a little scared. Do you know their names? After Ah Go confided in everything he had repressed, he felt much better and his tone was now much calmer. This group of people is known as the Wushan 8 Ghosts in the martial arts world, and it took me some time to learn about them. Their martial arts are all good, and the leader is called the Qingnian Ghost, but he is not the most powerful. The one who was taken away from the house last night has the strongest martial arts. Yi Shuyuan nodded slightly, and even had time to roast. The person who was taken away must be called a unlucky ghost, right? Ah Go couldn't help but laugh as he listened. After Yi Shuyuan finished joking, he took a long breath and then took a deep breath, speaking in a calm voice. Ah Go, you have a good heart, otherwise you wouldn't have been in such pain during this period. The martial arts world is very complex, not only chivalrous but also bandits. It's not always easy to seek revenge. If it's not for irreconcilable conflicts with your family, you'd better go home first after this time. Yi Shuyuan doesn't understand the martial arts here, let alone the martial arts world here, but what he is talking about is the martial arts world. Even in the 21st century before he came here, there were martial arts world. Egu fell silent, and Yi Shuyuan's thoughts had drifted far away. Egu still had a home to go back to, but what about himself? At this moment, the emotions that had been suppressed since yesterday erupted in Yi Shuyuan's heart. Even though he was naturally optimistic, he couldn't help feeling a bit sad. If possible, Yi Shuyuan doesn't want to come here at all. This is a world that makes him feel insecure, not to mention legal and medical aspects, as well as the immeasurable existence of monsters. In the evening, some struggling Ah Go took the initiative to take a break. When Yi Shuyuan agreed, he felt a bit embarrassed because the other party had carried him all the way. The two of them rested temporarily by a fallen withered tree. Watching Ah Go swing his hands up and down with his eyes closed, Yi Shuyuan guessed that this was internal breathing regulation. For young people who have not yet delved into the world or the city, this subconscious posture has already shown their feelings towards Yi Shuyuan and made him feel more relieved. But after only a short while, Ah Go finished breathing and scratched his head to look at Yi Shuyuan. Yi Shuyuan smiled and asked at this moment. "What is your name?" Yi Shuyuan didn't believe that the other person's name was Ah Go. Sure enough, when he asked this question, Go smiled and immediately replied happily. "Senior, my name is Malingfei." The nickname Ah Go was coined by them while wandering the world after leaving home. "I don't like it at all. People who are closer to me call me Ah Fei." "Senior, you can also call me that. So you didn't say it earlier." Yi Shuyuan has no choice but to complain about one sentence in his heart, but another one in his mouth. "Alright, I'll call you a Fei from now on. Abandon the nickname Egu just like in the past, and never use it again." A Fei widened his eyes slightly and did not dodge the bright gaze of Yi Shuyuan. Yi Shuyuan felt a small sense of pride and satisfaction, perhaps he had also saved a soul, so he spoke more easily. Of course, he chose to speak with care. "Let me ask one more question, how long did it take to practice martial arts to your current level?" A Fei's heart twitched slightly as he listened to these words. He wanted to stand up and speak, but after thinking about it, he couldn't come up with any fancy words that would make people's ears light up. His hand, which was supporting the ground, relaxed again and said with a slight sense of disappointment. "My aptitude is average, and I used to be more playful and not diligent enough in practicing. I started practicing at the age of 9, but now I am only 20 years younger and have this level of ability. Apart from having slightly better lightness skills, I am useless." Yi Shuyuan secretly thought that it was much stronger than the average person, but even if he was mentally prepared, he still felt somewhat helpless when he heard that it had been used for 10 years. It was not because he didn't think a Fei was practicing well, but because he imagined that if he wanted to learn some martial arts, it might be even harder. After careful consideration of his words, Yi Shuyuan took a few steps and then turned to look at a Fei, speaking again with a slight twist. "You, don't worry too much. If I want to see your martial arts and mental techniques, I don't know what I need." Before Yi Shuyuan could finish speaking, a Fei couldn't help feeling overjoyed in his heart. "Did the senior want to guide me?" At that moment, he jumped up. "Senior, I'll show you." How could Ah Fei carry the family secret script with him, but after practicing for so many years, he has memorized it. Some of the graphics on it are also his moves, just play them once. Flying, stepping on swallows, chasing the moon, tracking, clearing snow. As a Fei fought, he recited his moves in front of Yi Shuyuan. His body swayed, punched, howled, and swept away the snow and dust on the ground. His form was swift and agile, with a tiger-like aura. Bang! A Fei punched a thigh-thick pine tree, and in an instant, the surface of the bark seemed to crack, stretching for a meter. The entire pine tree kept shaking, and snow, pine needles, and dead branches rained down like rain. In the next moment, a Fei struck and swept the clear snow in the hall, his legs shaped like whips, bringing an invisible strong wind to hit rain, bouncing it away and sweeping a piece of pure land on the ground. The sense of strength and impact made Yi Shuyuan stare at a Fei, his eyes constantly widening. How impressive! So strong! It was completely unexpected and shocking. It is completely incomparable to the flashy performance techniques that ordinary people saw in their previous lives. At this moment, Yi Shuyuan realized that his previous concept of martial arts was completely wrong, and he even felt a sense of awe. The words he had just said were too easy. Yi Shuyuan felt that if the evil person who was killed by Yin were to randomly spell it out, his grave grass would be tall by this time next year. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Clear Heart Technique. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Clear Heart Technique. The whole set of martial arts was performed 3 times, and Afei's move names and mnemonics were also recited 3 times. Yi Shuyuan saw the end without blinking his eyes. Afei exhaled a long mouthful of turbid qi, swinging his arms to regulate his breathing and complete his exercises, and then looked at Yi Shuyuan. "Senior, I'm done." Yi Shuyuan stared blankly at Afei. "Is this just martial arts? What should a person in that industry look like?" Previously, due to the attack of that strange snake, those villains scattered and fled for their lives. Even the leader, apart from his lightness skills, did not show any strength in front of Yi Shuyuan. Now, I think he has become a frog at the bottom of a well. "Senior!" Afei shouted again, and Yi Shuyuan finally came to his senses. He looked at the other person and didn't know how to evaluate them, so he changed the topic first. "What you just recited was the mental method of your martial arts cultivation." Afei's expression was somewhat awkward, and he dared not exaggerate anything in front of Yi Shuyuan. "Senior, our Meijia fist is not considered a top-notch martial arts skill. There is no such thing as mind techniques, which are just some luck mnemonic formulas for supporting moves. It is only through diligent practice and accumulation over time that we can cultivate internal qi. It's already very impressive." Yi Shuyuan exclaimed heartily, while Afei scratched his head again, thinking that the senior was afraid of hurting his self-esteem, and then immediately asked eagerly. "Senior, do you have any guidance on my martial arts?" "Guidance?" Yi Shuyuan was stunned for a moment, feeling embarrassed in his heart. Afei really treated him like a senior. "There's nothing to point out." Seeing Afei's disappointed gaze, Yi Shuyuan couldn't help but say another sentence based on his feelings. "But when I saw you punching, your breath was actually not stable, just like last night when you panicked and dispersed your breath. Perhaps it would be much better if you could calm down a bit. After all, it involves the fundamental martial arts of the other party, and Yi Shuyuan is not good at just talking nonsense. Otherwise, he may harm the other party and can only comfort them by saying things that are absolutely not wrong." These words felt even more disheartened in Afei's ears. "Also, my father doesn't even look up to me, let alone my senior." The atmosphere suddenly fell silent and awkward. After taking a break for a while, the two of them began to rush on their way again. However, this time, Yi Shuyuan felt embarrassed to let Afei carry him on his back again. He only allowed Afei to use lightness skills on his back in some places where he was not easy to pass, which would require finding a place to spend the night. Afei became silent and remained silent until the evening. The two of them discovered a cave with an inner depression of 2 to 3 meters in the snow of the mountain valley. A bonfire was set up outside, and the inside quickly became very warm. In fact, Afei wanted to continue running overnight, but Yi Shuyuan couldn't bear it anymore. He persuaded Afei after some persuasion, and even coaxed and comforted Yi by saying that he could smell the demonic aura, and that he could adapt to any situation in advance, which convinced Afei. The chill had already been dispelled. Afei was baking mantu in silence before the campfire. He also took some ice from his bamboo pot and put it on the edge for natural thawing. Yi Shuyuan was pinching his almost half-finger-long beard, which he couldn't control for the time being. He touched his face again, thinking that he didn't know what his current self looked like, whether it was similar to his original self or completely different. Turning his head to one side, Yi Shuyuan looked at Afei sitting there with a gloomy expression, feeling a bit distressed in his heart. This silly kid has a good heart, but his mentality is so good that it's easy to have problems. He's just like his little cousin before. How can we explain this? But he really doesn't understand martial arts, Yi Shuyuan. Then Yi Shuyuan suddenly had a flash of inspiration and had it. We really don't understand martial arts, but if it comes to the method of calming and nourishing one's mind, Yi Shuyuan can't be considered completely ignorant either. What Yi Shuyuan thought of was meditation, not any martial arts practice in this world, but the kind of meditation he had in his previous life to cultivate his mind. Strictly speaking, it can also be considered a Taoist mental method, similar to meditation in his understanding. This has some effect on Yi Shuyuan's ability to simulate storytelling and oral skills in his mind. There have been many times of frustration before, and Yi Shuyuan has also used it to soothe his mentality. Although it is not very useful, it can at least make people's minds more peaceful. Fei, I don't have any unparalleled martial arts skills to pass on to you, but there are some ways to keep people calm and composed. Do you want to learn them? At this moment, Fei, who had been staring blankly at the fire, was stunned. He slowly turned his head and his expression went from simple surprise to disbelief. When he realized it, there was even a hint of tears in his eyes. Then, in ecstasy, he nodded like pounding garlic. I want to learn. Senior, I want to learn. Watching this scene made Yi Shuyuan exclaim in his heart that he was lying down, thinking to himself, if it doesn't work now, wouldn't this guy's mentality collapse? At this moment, Yi Shuyuan was already pondering how to deceive and comfort Fei for a while. At this point, there was someone who simply wrote the 3 words, expectation, on their face, staring at themselves with strong, glaring eyes, and Yi Shuyuan could only be a dead horse and a living horse doctor. Taking a few deep breaths quietly, Shuyuan cleared his throat and adjusted his breathing, speaking in a clear and powerful but not very loud voice. This method regulates the state of mind, and if you get it right, you should also pay equal attention to your state of mind. I will speak out to help you, come and meditate. Speaking out is actually a form of psychological suggestion. Yi Shuyuan is a bit confident in his own voice, and since Fei thinks he is a senior, he should also be more convinced by his words, which are also helpful for suggestion. Fei quickly put down his burning stick, wiped his hands on his clothes, and quickly sat cross-legged next to Yi Shuyuan. After thinking for a moment, he quickly got up and sat opposite Yi Shuyuan. Yi Shuyuan's lips twitched slightly, and regardless of anything else, he tried to maintain his own calm mindset. Keep your spine straight, place your hands naturally on your legs, close your eyes slightly, touch your tongue to heaven, adjust your breath, first naturally, then slow down, calm your breath, concentrate and focus. Yi Shuyuan didn't close his eyes. Seeing that Fei's eyelids were twitching, he naturally understood that he had a lot of distractions. He immediately spoke in a gentle and serious voice, increasing the volume of his voice and hinting. Don't look at the darkness with your eyes, but forget to look and forget the breath, so that there is no rest or thought. If your thoughts cannot be dissolved, filter out the thoughts and focus on one thought, constantly reminisce, and read thoroughly before stopping. Simply put, this sentence means that when there are too many distractions, do not directly turn to mindlessness. Instead, pursue one of the distractions, constantly thinking about a certain thing, and thinking about it until the moment when the thought is fully understood or the thought becomes uninteresting, the cessation of thought changes to mindlessness. On Fei's side, he couldn't fully enter the state, but the voice of the senior seemed to rush into his heart, echoing in the darkness of his mind, making him no longer focused on his gaze. Instead, he reached the realm of his mind with the sound, and his surroundings suddenly became ethereal. Seeing that Fei's eyelids no longer twitched and his breathing became even and long, Yi Shuyuan breathed a slight sigh of relief. He also gently closed his eyes, but to his surprise, he entered a state much faster than before. After a period of peace of mind, at a certain moment, Yi Shuyuan spoke again. Enlarge the mind to observe the world, contemplate one's own thoughts, exchange the energy of wind and clouds, feel the radiance of the sun and moon, shine into the mind, and gather the vitality of heaven and earth. At this moment, Yi Shuyuan seemed to be out of his mind riding the wind, and his body felt a light and ethereal feeling, as if there were really clouds and wind gathering to illuminate the interior. This feeling was very good in Fei's heart, he could no longer feel his body or even breathe. With the voice of his senior coming from outside, a vast and quiet darkness gradually emerged and began to brighten. This feeling was truly magical for Fei, causing his heart and mind to tremble. However, he soon realized that his internal energy had also begun to self-activate. Oh no, I just lost my mind. What should I do? Ah Fei felt extremely anxious in his heart. He controlled his internal energy to return to the dantian, but he pressed the gourd to float and lift the gourd. This urgency made his internal energy even more chaotic, and his body's meridians began to feel uncomfortable. Senior, I feel my inner breath moving, and the more I try to control my thoughts, the more chaotic and uncomfortable they become. Ah Fei didn't care much anymore and could only anxiously seek help from his senior. Yi Shuyuan was taken aback and detached from the feeling he had just had. He didn't know whether Ah Fei was referring to his understanding of qi or his own internal strength, but the two situations were very similar. He immediately spoke again, and his voice was even louder. Guard your mind, restrain distractions, do not let your mind wander, do not observe your mindset, use stillness to move, use movement to complement stillness, guard your own heaven and earth, and let the mountains and rivers roam freely. It is difficult for a person to completely ignore the sense of qi, because apart from those mysterious explanations, in the understanding of Yi Shuyuan, this itself represents a comprehensive reaction of thoughts and physiology, but it is considerable and uncontrollable. A person who knows magical martial arts should be able to do it, right? Sure enough, Ah Fei kept silently reciting Yi Shuyuan's words in his heart, his breathing gradually calmed down, his demeanor gradually calmed down, and his breathing became longer and longer. Even with each subsequent breath, there was a strange feeling that felt like he was drenched from head to toe, as if his mind was bright and beautiful. Yi Shuyuan finally felt at ease. In his view, Ah Fei's problem was similar to many people in his previous life, perhaps mainly due to his mentality. Even if his talent was really limited, he believed that if his mentality was not distorted, it would be greatly helpful, and he may not necessarily be able to achieve great things late. Then Yi Shuyuan looked at the campfire again. He was stunned for a moment and quickly crept to move away two mantu inserted with branches. One side was baked black, but it smelled delicious. To some surprise, it took Ah Fei a long time to wake up, but Yi Shuyuan thought for a moment and felt relieved. Although most people may not be able to hold on for long, Ah Fei still has martial arts skills, and martial arts in this world may also be inseparable from meditation and breathing. It's normal for him to do so for a while. When Ah Fei opened his eyes, he even felt a sense of trance. Although his eyes were open, they had not completely separated from that state. He sensed himself, and the just chaotic internal energy was now quietly in the dantian, not completely quiet, but with a faint rotation. Moving with a static body, using motion to contrast stillness. Ah Fei felt enlightened and turned to one side. Yi Shuyuan was tearing mantu there. Wake up. Yi Shuyuan smiled and asked, after all, sometimes it feels like sleeping, and staying up late and feeling mentally drained is still a good way to recover energy. However, at the next moment, Ah Fei's movements startled Yi Shuyuan. After Ah Fei stood up directly, he knelt down facing Yi Shuyuan and kept kowtowing on the ground. Thank you, master. Ah Fei has eyes that don't know the truth. He suspected that the master was dishonest. Ah Fei is stupid. Please accept Ah Fei, please accept Ah Fei. I'll go, why are you playing so much? Under Yi Shuyuan's shock, Fei had already kowtowed countless times. Upon realizing this, he quickly stood up and helped Ah Fei, but the latter still kowtowed with brute force. Now Yi Shuyuan is also a bit angry. Not to mention that I really don't know what powerful martial arts skills are, even if I am a senior in the martial arts world, do I still play forced buying and forced selling? That's enough. Just 2 words long, but due to Yi Shuyuan's different emotions, the harsh feeling in his voice seemed to instantly awaken Ah Fei. He realized that he had gone too far, and his kowtow naturally stopped in the process. Ah Fei was regretful in his heart. He remained motionless and worried about his gains and losses. Yi Shuyuan was amused and held up another branch with mantu stuck in it. Don't be stunned, let's eat. Hey! Ah Fei felt relieved and hurried to take the mantu. After a few mouthfuls, his mind drifted away again. After a while, he looked at Yi Shuyuan and asked carefully. Senior, do you have a name for the mental technique you just taught me? Mind technique. Yi Shuyuan was about to say something, but after a moment of thought, he spoke up with a somewhat awkward and related name. You can call it the clear heart technique. Clear heart technique. A Fei silently recited a sentence, feeling extremely excited in his heart. He didn't even know that this was a mindless technique, and he was so excited that he couldn't sleep tonight. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Unfair Children. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Unfair Children. What surprised a Fei a bit was that he might have been too tired after running for a day and a night. That night, he slept very peacefully and had no more nightmares from the past. However, Yi Shuyuan, who was close by, was not like this. He not only had dreams, but also had nightmares. He once again dreamed of the scene where he fell into the river. But in his dream, Yi Shuyuan stood at the bow of the boat looking into the water and saw the flowing light. At the next moment, both the person and the boat were directly sucked into the water. In front of him was no longer flowing water, but various chaotic scenes, and various thoughts seemed to be projected and integrated into it. Yi Shuyuan was not only thinking, but also watching. At that time, in front of his palm, there were dots of light, flowing paths of light, and many other images appeared. Yi Shuyuan also instinctively wanted to catch it. But Yi Shuyuan's heart was inexplicably flustered. His thoughts and emotions had unconsciously merged back into the past, almost suffocating in the water. The feeling of helplessness and longing made life worse than death. At this moment, the halo in the water exploded, and streams of light scattered. Hee. Yi Shuyuan was awakened from his trance, and his whole body was already sweating profusely. His heart was beating rapidly, as if it was about to burst through his chest. A Fei, who was originally sleeping peacefully, immediately jumped up and looked around, then came to Yi Shuyuan's side, his face full of nervousness. What's wrong with you, Senior? Did your old injury break out? Senior, how can I help you? Yi Shuyuan gradually eased his breath, wiped the sweat off his face, and shook his head. It's nothing, just a nightmare. Let's continue resting. After speaking, Yi Shuyuan didn't care about a Fei's reaction. He tightened his tightly covered leather jacket and lay down sideways. Is it because of that stream of light that I came here? What is it? As Yi Shuyuan thought this way, his panic inexplicably intensified. He quickly withdrew his thoughts and forced himself to sleep. A Fei looked at Yi Shuyuan's expression and hesitated to speak. Then he patted his head hard and sat by the campfire, adding firewood to take care of him. He felt energetic tonight and had rested enough. From that day on, A Fei and Yi Shuyuan traveled during the day, and at night, Yi Shuyuan slept. A Fei practiced the Qingxin technique, starting with the need for Yi Shuyuan's voice to guide him into stillness every time, and then he could spontaneously practice later. Yi Shuyuan also admired A Fei to some extent. This guy is really hard-working, and he can sit there without moving his butt all night. He once thought about whether he could do it, but when he calmed down for a long time, he would always have distractions. The most difficult thing to avoid is that he would think of falling into the river and wake up in a panic. That night, on the edge of a cliff, A Fei lit up a campfire again, grilling the unlucky rabbit he had caught during the day. Yi Shuyuan watched the rabbit almost make a sound and hadn't seen any oily water for several days. It used to be so happy to eat junk food in front of the computer in the middle of the night. But A Fei's heart is focused on the clear heart technique. Senior, I want to practice the clear heart technique first. Yi Shuyuan turned around to look at him. The rabbit won't eat anymore. A Fei scratched his head with a smile. I still want to practice first. Okay. Yi Shuyuan turned his hand and gestured to him to go aside. Upon hearing the permission of his senior, A Fei immediately sat slightly away from the campfire, and after crossing his legs, his breathing quickly spread out evenly. This is not just a difference in mood. A Fei realized that although he hasn't practiced boxing during this period, if he practices again, it will be different from before. This does not need to be verified, just looking at the state of internal qi is enough to illustrate the situation. Yi Shuyuan, who was spinning the rabbit over there, sprinkled salt while looking at a Fei over there. He thought to himself, is this guy actually a cultivable material? His family just doesn't recognize goods. A Fei's transformation is almost visible to the naked eye, becoming lively and confident in front of Yi Shuyuan. He can also tell some chivalrous stories, which can even be a kind of transformation. Of course, Yi Shuyuan is happy to see a Fei's transformation and sincerely hopes that it can accompany him forever, witnessing the occurrence of beautiful things. This process itself is also a kind of beauty. The firewood branches inside the bonfire occasionally crackled, and the roasted rabbit sprinkled with salt and oil on its surface. Yi Shuyuan withdrew his thoughts and looked at the mountains, not sure how big they were, but it seemed impossible to see the end. A Fei said he knows how to get out, and Yi Shuyuan is not sure how much moisture there is in this knowledge. When it comes to this, he can only trust him. The next morning, A Fei woke up with about half of a roasted rabbit that had already frozen hard in front of him. Yi Shuyuan rubbed his hands and stomped his feet to warm his body. Wake up. Today, you should carry me on your back. I walked too slowly on my own. Let's go out of the mountain as soon as possible. A few days ago, it was Yi Shuyuan who walked quite a bit on his own. When it was really difficult to walk, A Fei carried him on his back and used his lightness skills. Now he no longer wants to be reserved and yearns for nature. He has had enough of this icy and snowy environment. Oh, A Fei's voice was slightly lost. Since he realized the day before yesterday that he could also practice the Qingxin technique on his own, he had anticipated that his senior would definitely not walk slowly soon. Now, his premonition has indeed come true. Just as he was thinking about it, A Fei suddenly reached out and slapped himself. Ma Lingfei, your heart is not strong enough to swallow an elephant. How long do you want to be greedy? The loud slap startled Yi Shuyuan, who was baking snow water with a hot stone in a bamboo jar, and he looked at him in surprise. What do you do by hitting yourself well? It's okay, senior. My face is itchy. A Fei rubbed his face a few times, feeling relieved. The Qingxin technique was indeed powerful. Did you use a slap on your itchy face? Yi Shuyuan twitched at the corner of his mouth, but did not expose A Fei. When the water boiled, Yi Shuyuan drank a little before handing it to A Fei, who then took a few bites of frozen rabbit meat with the water. Then the two of them set off on their journey. Today, because it was carried by A Fei, Yi Shuyuan was particularly relaxed. In addition, he has become accustomed to the sense of difference and is no longer as thrilling as riding a roller coaster, allowing him to see the surrounding scenery. It has to be said that great people can write. The scenery of thousands of miles of ice and snow is indeed beautiful, but unfortunately, Yi Shuyuan did not have a mentality of appreciating the scenery. Senior, we are in the Tsangshan Mountains. With my current foot distance, I estimate that I will be able to see Quanan Mountain from the southeast tomorrow. Once we enter Quanan Mountain, Yuanjiang County will not be far away. Upon hearing A Fei suddenly say this, Yi Shuyuan's spirit was boosted. Can't you go wrong, right? I can't be wrong. Yi Shuyuan's mind was slightly at ease, while A Fei quickened his pace. Now, as long as he maintains the appropriate rhythm, he can continuously generate internal energy and travel faster than before. In fact, the place where A Fei followed the group of villains into the mountain was not Yuanjiang County, but in the Cangbei area, which was far apart. That's why Yi Shuyuan was worried that they might take the wrong path. After all, it is said that Tsangshan is very large, and getting lost inside the mountain is also normal. However, 2 days later, the actual situation proved that Yi Shuyuan's concerns were excessive. A Fei said that when they had entered Quanan Mountain, Yi Shuyuan could only, but after a while, a Fei's pace gradually slowed down. Looking ahead, Yi Shuyuan saw a monument standing on a hill with large characters dipped in red paint. Yuanjiang County on the border of Yuezhou. Yi Shuyuan silently recited the inscriptions that resembled seal script, but he didn't feel any sense of division, and his heart was slightly excited. It's really coming. The two of them have been walking in the icy mountains for so long. Before, they didn't feel much about it. After seeing the boundary marker, Yi Shuyuan is now eager to return to the human social group, and has an inexplicable sense of homesickness. The snow in the surrounding mountains and forests has clearly melted away, and many places have exposed land, even with occasional greenery. At a Fei's speed, he had already found the way down the mountain in less than half a day. However, as he approached another hill, Yi Shuyuan's heart suddenly trembled. Stop it, let me down. What's wrong, senior? A Fei stopped and Yi Shuyuan got off his back, following a small mountain path up a small slope. A Fei followed behind inexplicably, and the two gradually walked up a gentle hill surrounded by bamboo forests and bushes, but what caught Yi Shuyuan's attention the most was the area in front of the bamboo forest. Just like fate in the dark, the mountains and forests in winter are very quiet, and two graves in the distance stand in a place overgrown with weeds. Yi Shuyuan frowned and slowed down his pace, feeling hesitant to move forward. He forced himself to move forward until he stood a few feet outside the tombstone and saw the inscription clearly. First examine the tomb of Yi Sheng, first examine the tomb of Qin Yulan, and then examine the filial son Yi Baokongli. Looking at the words on the two tombstones, Yi Shuyuan's body trembled as he approached step by step, his thoughts blurring at this moment. A little bit, and then converge into a torrent. Intense and uncontrollable emotions constantly emerge from the mind, every corner of the body, and even from the depths of the soul. In front of the tomb of the second elder, tears had already flowed from Yi Shuyuan's eyes like flowing water, moistening his cheeks and flowing into his neck. They also dripped down his chin and made two soft calls in his choked throat. Parents. Countless memories flooded into his mind, countless emotions exploded in his heart. In an instant, time seemed as long as half a life, and Yi Shuyuan seemed to have gone through another journey from birth to growth. The mind radiates from the heart again to the outside world, and the gaze condenses from the blurry to the front of the eyes. At this point, Yi Shuyuan does not want to restrain himself and kneels in front of the tomb, constantly kowtowing to it. Dong, 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 mom and dad. The child is unfilial. The child is unfilial. The child came back late, the child is unfilial. Dong, 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 head broken and blood flowing, kowtowing incessantly. A Fei stood behind Yi Shuyuan in a daze, feeling a bit lost, and could only kneel down with him. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Children meet but do not know each other. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Children meet but do not know each other. Yi Shuyuan and a Fei stayed in front of the grave for half a day, clearing all the weeds around them. The feeling of sadness was very strong when it came, but it gradually calmed down at this moment. This was a strong emotion transmitted from the body, but even if the sadness reached this point, Yi Shuyuan tried his best to search for the memories that appeared, but could not remember the appearance of his parents. Senior, one cannot be resurrected after death. Please mourn. After tidying up the weeds and sitting in front of the tomb, a Fei finally couldn't help but say this carefully. Yi Shuyuan touched his broken forehead and let out a long sigh, staring blankly at the tombstone. Did I occupy the body of the son of the parents in the tomb, or did my foolish soul fly through another part of Yi Shuyuan's life? Yi Shuyuan has a feeling of Zhuangzhou Mengdai. Let's go to my house. At this moment, Yi Shuyuan had already understood the path, and there was a faint sense of familiarity in his eyes. He no longer needed to find Yuanjiang County first, nor did he need a Fei to find his way. He stood up and walked ahead, and a Fei naturally followed immediately. Senior, can I carry you on my back? No need, I want to go by myself. Yi Shuyuan glanced back at the hill behind him, walked along this familiar and unfamiliar mountain path, and walked step by step towards the mountain village. Looking in the direction of his gaze, a village hidden in the smoke of cooking was already in sight by the river at the foot of the mountain. Between several haystacks at the village entrance, a group of children were frolicking and dividing into two sides. The snowball battle between them was intense, and the childish cries of hee-hee and watching the ball seemed to simulate the momentum of the two armies facing each other. There's someone over there. Oh, are you still throwing it away? I don't know which child shouted out, and the children stopped one after another, but one child confiscated their hand and immediately threw a snowball into the air. It wasn't until Yi Shuyuan and Fei, who had come down the mountain path, approached that the group of children who had snowball fights truly stopped and curiously looked at the visitors. Are there any outsiders in this cold weather? Yi Shuyuan was worried about gains and losses, and instinctively adjusted his hair to reveal his facial features. Using his hand as a comb, he tried to tidy up the long hair hanging behind him with some knots as much as possible, and even got a troublesome beard. When he arrived at the village entrance, a group of children were all staring at the two of them, and Yi Shuyuan stopped walking. Is this Shiha village? Although the familiarity in his memory had already told Yi Shuyuan the answer, he still asked a question. A larger child looked around and answered. Yes, who are you? What are you doing here? Some children also looked curiously at Yi Shuyuan's forehead and whispered to their companions. What's wrong with his head? Yi Shuyuan's heart surged with complex emotions, his lips trembling slightly, and he couldn't say, go home. Is Yi Hanlin's family here? A group of children, you look at me, I look at you, or that child answered. I know all the people in the village. There's no one in Uncle Yi's family named Yi Hanlin, right? The child answered loudly in the first half of the sentence, and confirmed with his companions in the second half. The children nodded repeatedly, but their words were also heard by Yi Shuyuan. He remembered the words on the tombstone and tried to ask again. So, what about Yi Baokong? Oh, Uncle Yi, I know I'll take you there. The child was innocent and walked towards the village with Yi Shuyuan and Fei, while the other children followed suit bouncing and jumping. Yi Shuyuan's gaze kept wandering in the village, with many familiar but also more unfamiliar. When adults passed by or opened the courtyard door, they would ask a question. Who are these two? What are they doing? At this moment, there are always people among a group of children competing to answer. Outsiders, those who went to Uncle Yi's house, they came to visit our relatives. At such times, Yi Shuyuan didn't know what to say, only occasionally bowing to some villagers. The villagers only paid attention to the polite and kind behavior of the two, but there were also a few elderly people who frowned, seeming to feel a slight familiarity with one of them. Quickly, the children took Yi Shuyuan and his two companions to a courtyard in the village. A man who looked about 50 years old, wearing a cotton coat and a cloth scarf, was coming out carrying a bundle of hemp rope. Immediately, a child called out to him. Uncle Yi, someone is here to celebrate the Chinese New Year. Ah! The man with a frosty face instinctively looked up towards the direction of the sound, and was momentarily stunned. His eyes kept widening, standing in place, both excited and skeptical. While hesitating, his body trembled slightly. Is he dreaming? Yi Shuyuan also had an excited emotion mixed with a sense of familiarity rising from his body. It can be said that he recognized the person in front of him at a glance, but it was also somewhat unrecognizable. Fei stood quietly behind Yi Shuyuan, afraid to break the silence at this moment, and even reached out to make a silent gesture, signaling a few curious children not to make any noise. Taking a breath, Yi Shuyuan was the first to break the silence. Hanlin. The voice was heard, and the old man with gray hair carrying hemp rope couldn't stop crying. Brother. It's really you, it's really you. It's been over 20 years, where have you been? You, why haven't you changed? Bao Kong threw down the hemp rope and ran excitedly to Shuyuan, shedding tears as he looked up and down at him. Despite having 1,000 words in his heart, Shuyuan didn't know what to say. Is there another kind of shock lingering in Shuyuan's heart, having been away from home for more than 20 years? Fei watched in shock from the side, one old and haggard with graying hair, and the other full of green hair, but to his surprise, the former was his younger brother and the latter was his older brother. The other people in the yard looked out in great surprise when they heard the commotion. "Dad, what's wrong with you? Who are they? The head of the family, what are you calling outside?" A young man who looked somewhat similar to Bao Kong and a slightly aged woman walked out, with a young woman holding a child at the entrance of the courtyard. At this moment, there really feels like a world has passed away. What nonsense! It's your uncle back. Come on, kid, call uncle. Brother, go inside quickly. Bao Kong smiled angrily and pulled Shuyuan forward. Uncle. The young man widened his eyes, and the others naturally looked incredulous. The child didn't dare to scream at all, just huddled behind his mother and looked curiously. Several neighbors around also heard the sound and came to look. Amidst a lot of discussion, Shuyuan and Fei were invited into the yard. In the courtyard of the Yi family, the two brothers sat together, with other members of the Yi family standing beside them. Some of the previous children had never left, and some neighbors and people who had already followed were also inside. It has always been Bao Kong who spoke more, while Shuyuan spoke less. He was so excited that he shared his past and emotions. It has been over 20 years now, and even the villagers have almost forgotten the existence of such a foolish Yi family elder. It turned out that before Shuyuan was foolish, the little Hanlin who had been following behind him all along had already changed his name to Bao Kong before his father's death. In fact, before Shuyuan went missing, Bao Kong had changed his name for several years. However, at that time, Shuyuan had already been foolish for many years, and his mind was in a state of confusion. The most memorable younger brother in his heart was Hanlin. Bao Kong was pleasantly surprised that his elder brother was no longer foolish, and he was also amazed that he did not show any signs of aging, but more importantly, he confided in the bitterness and longing of these years. When it came to the moment when his mother passed away, Shuyuan's tears uncontrollably overflowed again. This was a feeling of physical memory touching his soul and heart. Not to mention being brothers of the Yi family, even those who listen can't help but shed tears. Fei secretly wiped his sleeves many times, and couldn't help but think of his parents. It's no wonder that his seniors asked him to go home before, and it's difficult not to be moved by this scene. At the same time, Fei also had a deeper imagination of Shuyuan's martial arts. It turned out that there were really people who could practice martial arts to such a high level, truly able to go against nature, and to some extent, their appearance was difficult to age. This day happens to be the Shangyuan festival. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Strange Things. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Strange Things. The sun was shining on that day. A few people were basking in the sun by the thatched cottage next to the grassy field in the village, holding their rice bowls and squatting over to eat while chatting. Before a new man could even squat down, he approached and waved his chopsticks while talking. "Hey, have you heard? The eldest son of the Lao Yi family has returned." A man who was sucking congee rice looked up at the words and stared at the visitor. His face was unbelievable. When he spoke, even some tiny congee foam came out. "What? Bao Kong is such an honest person, and there is a eldest son outside. Then his fierce wife must skin him. Oh, it's not what you think. It's Bao Kong's brother. His brother. He can't be that fool, can he? Tell me more. Come on, sit on a stool." Someone quickly gave the newcomer a chair, while he squatted on the side to eat. After the newcomer sat down politely, he began to speak. "Don't believe it, this matter has spread. I saw someone go to Bao Kong's house a few days ago to pay respects, isn't it just those two people? The newly arrived man grabbed his chopsticks and poked the dots in the air. Right, that's those two people. One is the eldest son of the Yi family, and the other is still a Jianghu guest. Well, after all these years, the name of the eldest son of the Yi family has been forgotten. What's his name? Yi Shuyuan. Someone reminded the talking man to grab his chopsticks and slap his thigh. Right, that's the name, Yi Shuyuan. What did the old man say back then? The Yi family had one Shuyuan and one Hanlin, how could they suppress this name? It harmed the child's life, so Uncle Sheng changed the name for Bao Kong only before his death. A man reached out and touched the congee grain at the corner of his mouth, then put it into his mouth and said in surprise. Are you saying that the fool who ran out, that Yi Shuyuan hasn't died yet? Not only did he not die, but he came back. I heard he even recovered from his foolish hysteria. The crowd was talking when another person came running over holding a bowl. With only a dozen steps left, they excitedly started talking. Hey, I have news that the eldest son of the Yi family has returned. Just talking about this, what new news do you have? Come over and talk about it together. The new person likes to talk with things in their mouth, while picking up rice and chewing a few bites before speaking mysteriously. I heard that person walked back on his own, looking even younger than Bao Kong. Don't look old, right? Not only does he not look old, but Nyo San said that his beard and hair were very black, and his face was also tender. He looked left and right and stared at the sky, saying that he couldn't even reach 30. Upon hearing these words, several people nearby were shocked and stopped delivering food. Ah! Are you serious about this? Is there such a thing? Did you hear me wrong, or did Nyo San read me wrong? Upon hearing his own news being refuted, the person speaking with food in their mouth immediately swallowed the food and questioned, gesturing for a direction in the village with their neck and mouth. It was obvious that there were also some people chatting on the other end. Well, there's not just Nyo San saying that over there, there are also a few others who have seen him say the same. Isn't it that the son of the leader of the Yi family has returned? Some people raise doubts about joint efforts, while others immediately refute them. Yes, calculating the time is indeed reasonable. Can Bao Kong admit his mistake? Yes, and which woman is willing to give birth to a child for a fool? What if there is one? What if he recovers outside? What if Bao Kong is confused? His family is suffering from hysteria. Well, that's not impossible either. Take a look after finishing your meal. Take a look. Yes, by the way, see what the Jianghu guests look like. A few people pondered about starting their own quick pickpockets. After all, no matter how old a person is, it is impossible for someone in their 50s to be like a young person. At least in remote rural areas like Shiha village, this kind of thing is unimaginable. Of course, compared to Yi Shuyuan, the martial artist Fei in the martial arts world also interests the villagers. At the entrance of the main room in Yi's courtyard, where the sun can shine and the wind can keep out, Shuyuan sits on a small stool, holding a pottery bowl filled with congee and a small amount of dried turnips. As he eats, he looks out of the courtyard. A woman in a jacket, skirt, and bun is washing clothes by the well in the courtyard. This is the daughter-in-law of her nephew Yi Yong'an. Yi Shuyuan's gaze skipped over the woman and then looked elsewhere. There were several low houses, earthen walls, and thatched doorways. There was snow on the roof of the houses and inside the courtyard, and his gaze extended outward. The surrounding houses were similar in style, both far and near. Looking up through the courtyard gate, the plain is covered in snow and the mountains are shrouded in snow. However, there are no tall buildings, no accessible roads, and it is impossible to see any electrical poles or the like. Of course, the villagers who either pretend to pass by or specifically lie at the door to watch cannot be ignored. Fei, who had something in his heart, stood beside Yi Shuyuan holding a pottery bowl, occasionally unconsciously following his gaze. However, Yi Shuyuan's gaze also narrowed back as the courtyard door closed. At this moment, Yi Baokong has already closed the gate of the yard, otherwise the house would be like being watched by a monkey, and there would always be people coming. Outside, there were murmurs and discussions from the villagers, and even those who dared to learn that a Fei was good at speaking called out to the courtyard. "Hey Jiang, who guessed, can you show us some martial arts?" "Yes, let's see. I heard that those with good martial arts skills can jump so high." Ha ha ha, both Yi Shuyuan and a Fei ignored this. Don't take it amiss, these idle brothers and my daxiao. After a while of busy farming, everyone should not be so idle anymore. Yi Baokong came over to apologize, and a Fei quickly said with a shy face. "Don't, Uncle Yi, don't call me that." However, despite his words, a Fei still felt a bit ethereal in his heart. Someone called him a hero, thinking so, but he would still carefully glance at Yi Shuyuan. Yi Shuyuan smiled, and I noticed all of a Fei's movements. "I don't even know if you're being careful." But Yi Shuyuan did not expose it either. Yi Baokong pats the dust on his body and goes to the kitchen to serve congee. His daughter-in-law, Zhao Shi, is talking to his son over there. It seems that there is a slight quarrel, and he can't help but quicken his pace. The wall of Yi's courtyard is slightly higher, and as soon as the door closes, there are fewer people coming quickly, at least not much noise. After eating congee, Ah Fei stood for a while, hesitating after some psychological struggle. "Senior, I want to go home now." Yi Shuyuan turned his head to look at him with a slight surprise. For a while, he had become accustomed to Ah Fei being by his side, but soon understood Ah Fei's words and his face showed a sense of relief. "You should go back now. Remember to reconcile with your father. I can tell from your words that he still cares about you." When will we leave?" Ah Fei lowered his head slightly. "Today." Yi Shuyuan nodded, but it was hard to say anything. He just ate all the congee in the bowl, and the feast would come to an end. What's more, he felt that he and Ah Fei were people from two different worlds. "Senior." Ah Fei's voice became louder, and Yi Shuyuan looked at him, only to see Ah Fei put down his bowls and chopsticks and knelt down with his hands clasped in front of Yi Shuyuan. "Senior, you saved my life and taught me the Dharma. It was my Lingfei who gave birth to my parents again. I will never forget this great kindness, and I will do my best to repay it in the future. If this life is not enough, then there will be another life. If there is not enough in the next life, then there will be another life. Senior, please accept my worship from my Lingfei." Excitedly speaking these words, Ah Fei bowed down and kowtowed 3 times in a more subdued manner. This time, Yi Shuyuan only stood up, but did not go to help Ah Fei. He just received a big gift from the other party, which made Ah Fei feel better. Li, who was doing laundry in the courtyard, stopped, and several people from the kitchen also poked their heads out. Ah Fei looked up and walked towards the courtyard door. After opening the door, he glanced back at Yi Shuyuan in the courtyard, then took a step out and lifted his inner breath to make a sound in the village. "Shiha village folks, if you want to see martial arts, let me show you." This is not only satisfying the curiosity of others, but also briefly indulging oneself, and showcasing one's gains to seniors. In the next moment, Ah Fei leaped up lightly, with a figure like a graceful butterfly and a light swallow flying bird. He used his fist techniques to lift the weight lightly and flew away in the air through the thatched cottage. Flying. Stepping on swallows. Chasing the moon. Fist roared like thunder, energy like a gust of wind, lifting up the snow on the roofs of many houses. Wherever it passed, it was like a flying swallow carrying fine snow, falling continuously. I also saw the villagers in Shiha village widen their eyes and mouths. Ah Fei's voice echoed and came, indicating that the person had already left. Yi Shuyuan looked into the distance, his heart filled with complexity and satisfaction. Ah, Faye's growth was not just about martial arts. End of this chapter.